The Galactic tournament had begun, a spectacle so grand that it echoed through the farthest reaches of the universe. Every year, powerful warriors from different corners of space gathered in the colossal arena, hoping to prove their strength, skill, and worthiness to wear the legendary armor. This was no ordinary competition. The prize wasn't just any treasure, but the armor that had been untouched for centuries. No one had ever been worthy of it. Each year, the aliens came in full confidence, thinking that they would be the ones to break the curse. But every year, the armor rejected them. This time, however, the stakes were higher than ever. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and the need for a powerful leader to guide the various species was critical. Rumors had spread that the armor could provide immense power, not just in battle, but in leadership. Whoever wore it would be able to unite the galaxy, for no enemy could stand against its might. So the tournament drew an even larger crowd this time. The spectators filled the massive stands, eager to witness who would emerge victorious. As the tournament kicked off, the first few battles went as expected. The alien competitors were all strong, skilled, and highly trained in their respective forms of combat. They fought with intensity and precision, displaying powers that many species could only dream of. The arena buzzed with excitement as one alien after another was defeated, but none were chosen by the armor. Each time a fighter finished their match, they would approach the armor, hoping for the approval that would crown them the true champion. And each time, the armor would reject them, its cold surface unyielding. The crowd began to murmur. The whispers spread from one spectator to the next. Could it be a human? Could a simple human even survive the tournament, let alone earn the armor? The thought seemed laughable. Humans were not known for their physical strength or advanced technology. They had never been part of these galactic games, their species viewed as insignificant and weak. The aliens couldn't imagine how a human could possibly stand a chance against them. But the whispers grew louder as a new figure entered the arena. The human was a young man, no older than 25, wearing simple armor that seemed out of place next to the elaborate and exotic battle gear of the other competitors. His name was Jason. He had been chosen not for his strength, but for his courage. Jason had been a soldier, fighting in the war that ravaged his home planet, Earth. He wasn't the strongest, nor the fastest, but he had a unique gift, a sharp mind and an unshakable will to survive. He had come here to prove that humanity, despite all odds, could stand side by side with the greatest warriors in the galaxy. The crowd fell silent as Jason stepped into the arena, their eyes filled with disbelief. The aliens, too, watched him closely, sizing him up with judgment in their eyes. How could he possibly think he could compete against them? Jason didn't flinch. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but he had made it this far, and he was determined to see it through. The first few rounds were brutal. Jason faced opponents who were far more skilled and powerful than he had ever imagined. His first match was against a towering alien with massive muscles and an intimidating axe. The creature roared as it charged at him, swinging its weapon with terrifying force. Jason ducked and dodged, narrowly avoiding each blow. His heart raced as he struggled to find an opening. He knew he didn't have the strength to defeat this opponent head-on, but he had something else: quick thinking. Jason weaved through the alien's attacks, using the environment to his advantage. He kicked sand into the creature's eyes, blinding it for a moment, and then used his speed to land a strike to the alien's knee, causing it to stumble. The crowd gasped as Jason's unexpected move caught the alien off guard. With the creature momentarily stunned, Jason lunged and knocked the axe out of its hand, forcing it to surrender. The crowd erupted into applause, but Jason could hear the disbelief in their voices. How did a human do that? They whispered. His next opponent was an alien with incredible speed, its slender body moving like a blur. It attacked with a series of rapid punches, each one faster than the last. Jason couldn't keep up with the onslaught, but he didn't panic. Instead, he focused on his breathing and waited for the right moment. When the alien lunged toward him with a punch aimed at his chest, Jason sidestepped and grabbed its arm, twisting it behind its back. With a quick maneuver, he forced the alien to the ground, winning the match in a surprising turn of events. The spectators began to take notice. Though Jason wasn't the strongest or the fastest, his intelligence and adaptability were undeniable. He wasn't winning because of brute strength, but because he was using his mind, something the alien warriors had not expected. His victory didn't just surprise the crowd. It also began to sow seeds of doubt among the other competitors. Could this human be the one the armor would choose? The thought seemed impossible, but the more Jason fought, the more the question lingered in the air. In the stands, a hush fell over the crowd as Jason approached the armor for the first time. It stood at the center of the arena, glowing with an eerie light, its surface smooth and mysterious. No one knew what it looked like inside, but it was said that the armor could only be claimed by the most worthy. The aliens had tried, one after another, but none had succeeded. As Jason stepped forward, the crowd held its breath. Would the armor reject him as it had rejected the others? Or was there something special about this human after all? Jason stood before the armor, his heart pounding in his chest. The cold silence of the arena weighed on him, but he stood tall. He wasn't here for glory or fame. He was here to prove that humanity had a place in the galaxy. The armor remained still, its surface unchanging. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, something strange occurred. A faint pulse of light emanated from the armor, as if it were sensing Jason's presence. The crowd gasped. The energy surrounding the armor seemed to stir, and Jason could feel it. It was as if the armor was alive, searching for something in him. The tension in the arena grew thick, the spectators waiting for the inevitable rejection. But the armor did not push him away. Instead, it seemed to beckon him closer, its light growing stronger. Jason hesitated, unsure of what was happening. Was this a trick? Was the armor about to test him in some way? He took a deep breath and reached out. As his hand touched the surface, the armor pulsed once more, and then, in a burst of light, the entire arena shook. The crowd gasped in shock. The armor had not rejected him. It had accepted him. For a brief moment, everything was still. Jason stood there, in awe, as the armor encased him. It wrapped around his body, fitting him perfectly as though it had been made for him alone. The crowd watched in stunned silence. What had just happened? The legendary armor, which had denied countless warriors, had chosen a human. A simple human, with no special powers or advanced technology, had earned the right to wear it. The tension in the arena was palpable. Jason was no longer just a competitor. He was now something more. The armor, glowing with an otherworldly power, hummed with energy as it molded itself to him. For the first time in the history of the Galactic tournament, the armor had chosen a human. And as Jason stood there, feeling the immense power coursing through him, he realized that his fight had only just begun. The arena was filled with a heavy silence as Jason stood there, encased in the armor. The crowd, which had once laughed at the idea of a human entering the tournament, now stared in disbelief. This was no longer just a tournament. It had become a symbol of something greater. Jason could feel the weight of the armor, not just physically but mentally. It was as if a whole new world of possibilities had opened up to him. But at the same time, it was terrifying. The armor was not just a suit of protection. It was alive, it was powerful, and it was pushing him to be something more than he ever imagined. The first sensation that hit him was the overwhelming surge of strength. He flexed his muscles, feeling the armor adjust to his every movement. It was as if it had become a part of him, amplifying his abilities far beyond his normal limits. His senses were sharper, his reflexes faster. He could feel the energy coursing through the suit, making him feel invincible. But as he moved, a strange whisper echoed in his mind. It wasn't a voice he could clearly hear, but it was there, a presence urging him forward. Use the power, it seemed to say, the voice as cold and distant as the armor itself. Jason shook his head, trying to focus. This wasn't what he had signed up for. He had entered the tournament to prove that humanity could stand on equal footing with the alien species of the galaxy, not to become a weapon of destruction. But the armor seemed to have its own ideas, pushing him to fight, to dominate. He fought the urge, but it was becoming harder with every passing second. The other competitors watched in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like it. The armor had chosen a human, a species they considered weak and insignificant, and now that human was standing before them as something else entirely. It wasn't just a symbol of human potential. It was a symbol of power, a power that no one could deny. The aliens were starting to realize that the competition was no longer about who was the strongest. It was about who could outlast the force that was now embodied in Jason. Jason glanced around, meeting the eyes of his next opponent. This alien, a massive creature with tentacles and scales, looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and growing fear. It was clear that the armor had changed the rules of the game. The alien was strong, yes, but it could sense the power radiating from Jason. It wasn't just the armor. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. And for the first time in the tournament, the alien hesitated. Jason wasn't sure how he was supposed to fight now. He had never faced anything like this, never fought in armor that seemed to think for itself. But he couldn't let fear take over. He had to keep his focus, remind himself that he was still human. He couldn't let the armor control him, or he would lose himself. The alien roared and charged, its tentacles moving like lightning. Jason instinctively raised his arm, and the armor reacted. With a loud clang, the alien's tentacles slammed against Jason's shield, but instead of staggering back, Jason held his ground. The armor seemed to enhance his own strength, allowing him to withstand the blow effortlessly. The alien tried again, but Jason was faster now, using the armor's agility to sidestep and land a powerful blow to the creature's side. The alien grunted, clearly stunned by the force behind the attack. Jason felt a rush of satisfaction, but he also felt something else, a desire to keep fighting, to keep winning. It was the armor, pushing him, urging him to be stronger, to show the galaxy that humans could be more than they were ever given credit for. But in the back of his mind, he knew that he was walking a fine line. If he allowed the armor to take control, he would become something he couldn't return from. The battle raged on, each strike more intense than the last. Jason's movements became smoother, more fluid, as though the armor was guiding him. It was as if he could sense the alien's every move before it happened. He felt invincible, but at the same time, he felt disconnected from the world around him. His every thought was clouded by the pull of the armor, urging him to take control, to destroy. It was a terrifying feeling, knowing that with a single thought, he could unleash an unstoppable force. Finally, with a well-timed strike, Jason landed a blow that sent the alien sprawling to the ground. The crowd roared in approval, but Jason didn't hear it. He was too caught up in the overwhelming rush of power that surged through him. His breath came fast, his heart pounding in his chest. It was like a drug, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the armor was feeding off his emotions, growing stronger with every victory. As he stood over the defeated alien, Jason looked down at the glowing armor that encased him. It was no longer just a piece of equipment. It was part of him now, controlling his actions, guiding his every move. He had won, but at what cost? The alien, struggling to stand, looked up at him, eyes filled with fear and awe. It was clear that Jason had proven himself as a warrior, but the alien's gaze also held a question. What kind of warrior would he become? The fear wasn't just for the present. It was for the future, for what the human might turn into if he fully embraced the power the armor offered. Jason stepped back, his chest still heaving with adrenaline. He was victorious, but he felt no joy. The armor had given him strength, but it had also taken something from him. He wasn't sure what that something was yet, but he knew it was there. The more he fought, the more he felt the armor pulling him in. The whispers in his mind were growing louder, urging him to keep fighting, to keep winning. The question wasn't whether he could defeat his opponents. The question was whether he could defeat the darkness that was beginning to stir within himself. As Jason walked away from the battlefield, the crowd's cheers fading into the background, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. He had been chosen by the armor, but at what cost? And more importantly, would he be able to control the power that was now coursing through his veins, or would it eventually control them? The tournament was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Jason had proven that a human could stand among the greatest warriors in the galaxy, but now he had to face a far greater challenge, the battle within himself. And with each passing moment, the whispers grew louder. As Jason continued through the tournament, the weight of the armor began to feel heavier. Each battle had tested his physical limits, pushing him further than he ever thought possible. Yet with each victory, he felt a deeper sense of power coursing through his veins. The armor had chosen him, and now, it seemed, the armor was becoming more than just a tool. It was becoming an extension of his very being. The whispers in his mind were no longer faint echoes. They were growing louder, urging him forward, pushing him to be more, to dominate. In his next match, Jason faced an alien that was unlike any he had encountered before. This creature, a hulking, muscular being from a planet of fire and heat, stood towering over him, its skin flickering like molten lava. Its red eyes glowed with a fierce intensity, and the ground trembled beneath its feet as it approached Jason with a menacing roar. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They had seen powerful fighters before, but none with the raw strength of this creature. Jason knew that this battle would be different. His previous strategy of quick thinking and agility would not work here. He would need to fight with all the power he had. The armor seemed to hum with anticipation, and Jason's heart raced as the creature charged. The ground shook as it swung its massive fists toward him, each blow creating a shockwave of heat and force. But Jason didn't move. Instead, he allowed the armor to guide him, letting it take control of his movements. The whispers in his mind grew louder, more insistent. "Destroy it," they urged. "Use the power. Show them who is the strongest." Jason clenched his fists, and for a moment, he felt as though he was no longer in control. The armor was. His body moved on its own, dodging the creature's strikes with incredible speed and precision. The power within him surged, and he could feel the heat of the alien's attacks. But it didn't matter. The armor protected him. It enhanced his strength, allowing him to fight back with a force he had never imagined. As the battle raged on, Jason began to lose himself in the power. The whispers became commands, driving him to be faster, stronger, more ruthless. His every move was calculated, but it wasn't his mind doing the calculations. It was the armor. His body moved instinctively, as if it were a weapon, and Jason was the one wielding it. He landed blow after blow on the alien, each strike harder than the last. The creature roared in pain, but Jason felt no mercy. The armor's influence was too strong. The alien finally staggered, its molten skin crackling and splintering under the force of Jason's attacks. It tried to retaliate, swinging its massive fists with all its remaining strength, but Jason was too fast. He moved in a blur, sidestepping its attacks and landing a crushing punch to its chest. The alien collapsed to the ground, defeated. For a moment, Jason stood over the fallen creature, panting heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the power of the armor surging through him, stronger than ever before. It was intoxicating. He had won, and the feeling of victory was overwhelming. But as he looked down at the alien, lying motionless at his feet, a strange sense of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It wasn't about proving humanity's worth. It was about something darker. The whispers in his mind grew louder, more insistent. They weren't just urging him to fight. They were urging him to conquer, to take what was his. "You are the strongest," the voice said. "You are the chosen one. No one can stand against you." Jason shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. This wasn't him. This wasn't who he was. He had to fight this. But the whispers wouldn't stop. They echoed in his mind, louder and louder, drowning out his own thoughts. Embrace the power, they said. You are destined for greatness. You are the one who will lead the galaxy. Jason stumbled back, his hands trembling. He could feel the armor's power overwhelming him, its dark influence seeping into his thoughts. He wasn't sure how much longer he could resist. The armor was giving him everything he had ever wanted: strength, power, victory. But at what cost? As he stood there, the crowd erupted into cheers, but Jason didn't hear them. He didn't hear anything except the voice inside his mind, urging him forward. The arena blurred in his vision as he tried to focus, but the weight of the armor was too much. It was as if he was losing himself, slipping into something he couldn't control. Jason shook his head again, trying to push the voice away. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let the armor control him. But the more he fought it, the stronger the whispers became. It was clear now. The armor had chosen him not just because of his strength, but because it could bend him to its will. The next few days in the tournament were a blur. Jason fought, and he fought hard. With each victory, the whispers grew louder, and the power of the armor became harder to resist. He was no longer the same person who had entered the arena days ago. He had become something else, something dangerous. The armor had made him strong, but it had also made him distant, cold. He wasn't sure who he was anymore, or what he was becoming. The other competitors had begun to notice the change in him. At first, they had seen him as a challenge, a human who had somehow earned the right to fight alongside them. But now, they saw something else, something they feared. The way Jason moved, the way he fought, the way he seemed to absorb every attack without flinching. It was as if he was untouchable, unstoppable, and that frightened them. But Jason didn't care. He couldn't care. The whispers in his mind had drowned out everything else. All that mattered was winning. All that mattered was power. And the armor promised him more of it. As he approached the next battle, he knew that it was only a matter of time before he faced the final challenge, the greatest warrior of them all. And when he did, there would be no mercy. There would be no hesitation. The armor had already decided his fate. And now, it was time for him to fulfill his destiny. Jason had been chosen. He had been given the power to lead. But at what cost? The armor was changing him, warping him into something he didn't recognize. And with every passing moment, it became clearer. The true test was not whether he could win the tournament. The true test was whether he could remain human. The final match was set. Jason stood in the center of the arena, his body encased in the dark, gleaming armor that had transformed him into something more than human. The air crackled with tension as the crowd eagerly awaited the ultimate battle. The tournament had been fierce, with the strongest competitors falling one by one, but none of them had come close to Jason's strength, speed, or resilience. He had faced every challenge with overwhelming power, and now he was about to face the champion, the one who had won the tournament in previous years, a being of unmatched skill and battle-hardened experience. This time, though, it was different. Jason wasn't just a competitor. He was the one who had been chosen, the one who had been accepted by the armor. The champion, an alien known as Kel, was a terrifying sight. His race was known for their brutal combat abilities, and Kel had been the reigning champion for centuries. He was tall, muscular, with dark scales that shimmered like obsidian under the light. His eyes burned with an intensity that reflected years of victory in battle. The alien species that Kel represented had mastered every form of weaponry, and Kel himself was a master tactician. He had never lost a fight, and no one expected him to lose this time either. But as Kel walked into the arena, his eyes narrowed when he saw Jason, his expression a mixture of curiosity and something else. Fear. Jason stood tall, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. The whispers of the armor were louder than ever, urging him to embrace the full extent of his power. The armor pulsed against his body, alive with energy, and Jason could feel its influence pushing him to fight with no mercy. He wasn't just facing an opponent now. He was facing a destiny that he didn't fully understand. The armor had chosen him, but it hadn't come with instructions. It had given him the power to win, to dominate, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker lurking inside him. The whispers had only grown stronger as the tournament had gone on, filling his mind with thoughts of conquest, of ruling over the galaxy. He had always believed in humanity's ability to rise above the odds, but now he wasn't sure who he was fighting for anymore. Kale reached the center of the arena, his voice booming across the stadium. "Human," he sneered, "you are strong, but you are not a warrior. You are a puppet, controlled by that armor. You cannot defeat me. I have won this tournament for centuries, and I will defeat you just like I have defeated all others." Jason didn't respond. He could hear the doubt in Cal's voice, but he also felt the alien's confidence. Cal was no ordinary fighter. He had seen and survived every battle, and his experience was unmatched. But Jason wasn't sure if experience was enough anymore. The armor had turned him into something else, something unstoppable. Every battle had made him stronger, but it had also made him colder, more detached from the world around him. He had stopped caring about the other competitors, about the crowd, even about his own humanity. All that mattered was winning. All that mattered was the power that surged through his body. The gong sounded, signaling the start of the match. Kale moved first, his massive body charging forward like a predator. He was fast, faster than Jason had expected, and his strikes were precise, calculated. He swung his enormous blade at Jason, aiming for his head, but Jason instinctively blocked the attack with his gauntlet. The sound of metal against metal rang out through the arena, and the force of the blow sent a shockwave through Jason's body. For a moment, he felt the weight of Cal's power, but then the armor responded. It was as if the armor itself absorbed the impact, reinforcing Jason's strength. Jason retaliated quickly, his body moving with a speed that even Cal couldn't predict. He slammed his fist into Cal's chest, sending the alien staggering backward. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Cal had been knocked off balance by a human. It was unheard of. Jason's every movement was amplified by the armor, making him a blur of strength and speed. He landed blow after blow, each strike sending shockwaves through Cal's body. But Cal was no novice. He recovered quickly, his instincts honed by years of battle. He twisted his body and lashed out with his blade again, this time aiming for Jason's legs. Jason barely had time to react, but the armor did. It moved on its own, shifting to protect Jason, and the blade glanced off the surface of the armor, leaving only a small mark. Jason's heart raced, but the armor's influence took over, and he felt a surge of adrenaline. The whispers in his mind urged him to finish it, to take Cal down now while he had the chance. "Finish him," the voice echoed. "No mercy." Jason hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Cal's next strike came fast and relentless, catching Jason off guard. The alien's blade cut into the armor, leaving a deep gash in the metal. Jason stumbled back, the pain searing through him, but the armor responded, quickly healing the wound. Jason's vision blurred as the power of the armor surged within him, but something else began to stir. Something dark, something he couldn't control. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. Cal took advantage of Jason's momentary weakness and charged forward, his blade aimed straight at Jason's chest. But Jason couldn't focus on the pain. The armor had consumed him. He was no longer just a man in a suit of metal. He was a weapon, a force of nature, and the armor had given him a singular purpose: to win. With a roar, Jason lashed out, his fist connecting with Cal's side with a force that shattered the alien's ribs. Cal cried out, but Jason didn't stop. He swung again and again, each blow landing with a brutal force, until Cal was on the ground, gasping for breath. The crowd fell silent as Cal struggled to rise. His eyes, once full of pride and confidence, were now filled with disbelief and pain. Jason stood over him, the armor gleaming in the light, his chest heaving with exertion. He had won. But as he looked down at the fallen champion, a wave of doubt swept over him. He had defeated Kale, but at what cost? The whispers in his mind were still there, urging him to take control, to conquer. But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing himself to the armor. He had become what he feared, a tool of destruction. The crowd began to cheer, but Jason couldn't hear them. He couldn't hear anything except the voice inside his mind, telling him that this was just the beginning. "You are the strongest," the voice whispered. "You will lead. You will rule." Jason took a step back, his hands trembling. He had won the tournament, yes, but the victory felt hollow. The armor had given him everything he wanted: strength, power, the title of champion. But it had also taken something from him: his humanity. The whispers grew louder, urging him to embrace the power. But Jason didn't want to be controlled by the armor. He didn't want to become the thing he had feared. For a moment, he stood there, torn between the power that surged through him and the person he used to be. And as the cheers of the crowd echoed in his ears, Jason realized that the true battle had only just begun. The armor had chosen him, but now it was up to him to decide what kind of man he would become. Would he let the armor consume him completely, or would he fight to retain the humanity that had brought him here in the first place? Only time would tell. The days following Jason's victory were a blur. His name echoed throughout the galaxy. His face was plastered across news outlets and holoscreens everywhere. He had won the Galactic tournament, something no human had ever done before. And yet, despite the fame, the glory, the admiration from countless alien species, Jason felt empty. The armor, which had given him strength beyond anything he had ever imagined, was now a constant presence in his life. It wasn't just a suit, it was a force, a power that had seeped into every fiber of his being. The whispers inside his mind never ceased. They pushed him, controlled him, and every time he tried to resist, the armor's grip only tightened. In the privacy of his quarters aboard the spaceship, Jason stood before a mirror, staring at his reflection. The man who looked back at him wasn't entirely human anymore. The armor had changed him, physically and mentally. His once human face was now barely visible behind the helmet that had fused with his skin. His eyes, once filled with hope and determination, now reflected the cold, mechanical gaze of the armor. It wasn't just a transformation, it was an erasure of who he had been. The whispers urged him to embrace it, to accept the power that had been granted to him. "You are no longer weak," they whispered. "You are a force. The galaxy will bow before you." Jason gripped the edges of the sink, trying to steady himself. He didn't want this. He didn't want to lose himself to the power, to the dark influence of the armor. But every time he tried to push the whispers away, they returned stronger, louder. His victories in the tournament had only fed the armor's desire for domination. It had made him an unstoppable force, and Jason could feel the danger in that. The more he used the armor's power, the less control he had over it. It was as if the armor wasn't just a tool. It was a sentient being, a presence that was slowly taking over his mind. In a desperate bid to regain some control, Jason sought out the one person who might be able to help him. He had heard rumors of a mysterious figure, an old hermit who lived on a distant world, far from the reaches of the tournament's influence. This hermit, a former warrior who had once worn a similar armor, was said to have freed himself from its grip. Jason needed answers, and this was his last hope. The journey to the hermit's world was long and treacherous, but Jason had no choice. The whispers grew louder with each passing day, urging him to give in, to let the armor take control. But Jason held on. He couldn't give up. He had to find a way to break free before it was too late. When Jason finally arrived at the hermit's secluded dwelling, he was met by a frail old man who appeared to be no more than a shadow of his former self. The hermit's eyes, though weary, were clear and knowing. He had once worn the same armor that Jason now struggled with, and he understood the dangers that came with it. "You seek freedom," the hermit said, his voice raspy but firm. "You wish to rid yourself of the armor's hold." Jason nodded, his voice tight. "It's consuming me. The power, the whispers. I don't know how much longer I can resist." The hermit's gaze softened, and he motioned for Jason to sit. "The armor is not just a tool of strength. It is a reflection of your deepest desires, your fears. It will push you to be more, to become the strongest. But it will also take from you everything that makes you human. It feeds on your emotions, your ambitions. The more you use it, the more it becomes a part of you. And once it has you, it will never let go." Jason felt a cold shiver run through him. The hermit was right. The armor had already taken so much from him, and yet he couldn't bring himself to let it go. He had been chosen. He had been given the strength to change the fate of humanity. But at what cost? Was it worth losing himself in the process? "I never asked for this," Jason said, his voice filled with frustration. "I just wanted to prove that humans can be strong, that we belong among the stars. But now I don't even recognize myself." The hermit nodded, understanding. "The armor doesn't care about your desires. It only cares about power. And if you let it, it will take everything from you. But there is a way to break free. You must face it, face the power it has given you, and decide if it is worth the price." Jason looked down at his armored hands, the glowing symbols etched into the metal a constant reminder of what he had become. He had won the tournament, but he was losing himself in the process. The whispers in his mind had grown almost deafening, urging him to take control, to conquer. But Jason wasn't sure if he could handle the burden of that kind of power. "You must learn to control it," the hermit continued, "not by resisting, but by accepting that it is a part of you. Only then can you keep your humanity intact. If you try to fight it head-on, you will lose. The armor feeds on resistance. But if you accept it as a part of you, you will regain control." Jason closed his eyes, taking in the hermit's words. Could it really be that simple? Could he truly accept the armor, not as a burden, but as something that was a part of him? It sounded like madness, but the hermit had lived through it. He had once been like Jason, controlled by the armor's power, and yet he had found a way to free himself. "I'm afraid," Jason admitted, his voice trembling. "Afraid of what I might become if I fully accept it. I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to become a monster." The hermit's eyes softened with empathy. "The armor will not make you a monster, Jason. You are the one who chooses who you become. It will test you, challenge you. But in the end, it is your choices that will define you. You must understand that the power it gives you is only as dangerous as your own will. If you let it control you, it will consume you. But if you control it, you will become something greater than you ever imagined." Jason sat in silence, the weight of the hermit's words pressing down on him. Could he really control the armor? Could he truly embrace its power without letting it take over? He wasn't sure, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe he could find a way to live with the armor. Maybe he could still be human. The hermit stood, his frail body moving with surprising strength. "It is time for you to face your greatest challenge, Jason. Not the tournament, not the aliens, but yourself. The battle is not out there," he said, gesturing toward the stars. "It is within you." Jason nodded, standing as well. The whispers were still there, but now they didn't seem as loud. The power of the armor was still with him, but he had a choice. He could choose how to wield it, and he could choose who he would become. It wasn't too late. He wasn't lost yet. As Jason left the hermit's dwelling, he felt the weight of the armor on his shoulders once more, but this time it felt different. It felt like a part of him, but not in the way it had before. The armor wasn't controlling him anymore. He was in control. And that, he realized, was the true victory. The battle within himself had only just begun, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The tournament had been a test, But the real journey was only just beginning. Jason had been chosen by the armor, but now it was up to him to choose who he would become. The whispers still echoed in his mind, but now they were just whispers. And Jason knew, deep down, that as long as he held on to his humanity, he would never truly lose himself. The galaxy had been warned. The strongest human had arrived. But Jason had learned that strength wasn't just about power, it was about knowing when to use it and when to let go.